Since 1993, the Skoda Favorit has been fitted with the Bosch Mono-Motronic engine management system. A single electronic control unit, or ECU as it's known for short, controls all the functions of the ignition and fuel injection systems. By monitoring the engine via a number of sensors, the ECU can determine the optimum ignition firing point and the fuel injection delivery quantity for the engine's constantly changing requirements. The system also alleviates the routine idle speed and CO adjustments as they're corrected automatically by the ECU. To assist with troubleshooting in the event of a fault occurring, the ECU incorporates self-diagnosis. The self-diagnosis system monitors functions such as lambda control, mixture correction, and the majority of sensor and actuator circuits. In the event of a defective signal, such as that caused by a component or its wiring becoming open or short circuit, it's recognized by the system and then stored in the ECU's fault memory. It's important, however, to appreciate that the self-diagnosis system can only determine that the circuit as a whole is defective. In other words, it can't differentiate between a faulty component, a loose connection, or a broken wire. To locate the fault more precisely, further testing will be required. Furthermore, the self-diagnosis system can only use its own programmed logic to determine faults. This can, on occasions, result in a displayed fault actually being caused by a closely related problem. If it's a permanent fault, it remains stored in the memory until it is manually erased or the battery is disconnected. If it's of an intermittent type, on the other hand, it's erased automatically after 10 engine starts. That's assuming, of course, that the fault hasn't reoccurred during that time. As there is no visible indication to the driver, such as a fault memory warning light, it's essential to ensure that faults don't go undetected and that the memory is interrogated at every service. On early 1993 models, the fault memory of the Mono-Motronic system can be interrogated by a flashcode sequence. This is a little slow in operation, and it also means decoding the flashcode to interpret the results. But by using the VAG1552, the procedure is speeded up considerably. The 1552 enables rapid interrogation of the self-diagnosis fault memory, and moreover, the results don't require decoding. In fact, due to this improvement, the flashcode facility of all later models has been deleted. The 1552 also allows you access to many other diagnosis functions, which are not accessible by flashcode. But more about those later. At the moment, the Skoda Favorit has just one ECU, that of the Mono-Motronic system. But in the future, as other electronically controlled systems are gradually introduced, there'll be more ECUs, and each one probably incorporating its own fault memory. The 1552, however, is designed to communicate with any number of them. So, before starting to explain the operation of the 1552, it's important to understand just how it communicates with the ECU. A single data transfer cable connected to any number of ECUs transmits the data to and from the 1552 and the ECUs. On request, the 1552 sends a coded signal, known as an address code, to wake up the relevant control unit. Every system's ECU has a unique code. Thus, if an address code for the engine management system is transmitted, then only the Mono-Motronic ECU will answer. Any other control unit won't recognize the code and thus will ignore the signal. Having contacted the ECU via the address code, the 1552 can initiate a number of different functions. However, do remember that the VAG1552 can only communicate with and check the self-diagnosis systems of ECUs, It does not check any of the vehicle's other electrical circuits. The 1552's keypad has 16 keys. The numeric keys, 0 to 9, are used to enter various codes, while the C key cancels a previously entered code. Pressing Q acknowledges or confirms an entered code, and the horizontal arrow key moves the test sequence on to the next stage. The vertical arrows move the display up or down within certain test functions, and the Help button, as you might expect, calls up additional information. A connection port on the side of the tester enables it to be connected to a printer via a personal computer. The removable program card means that the 1552 can be easily updated with new software as new models and test procedures are introduced. Incidentally, other than it not having a printer and its inability to initiate flashcode sequences, the 1552's operation and functions are identical to those of the VAG1551, with which some of you may already be familiar. So, now you know a little more about the 1552 and how it communicates. Now let's look at how to use it. The 1552 connects to the vehicle's diagnostic socket via an adapter loom number T003. The 5-pin socket connects to the vehicle, while the black 2-pin sockets join to the 1552's own connecting lead. To reduce the risk of incorrect connection, the two black sockets have different profiles, but please take extra care when joining them to the 1552. We'll show you to where they connect in just a moment. With the ignition switched off, the blanking plug from the vehicle's diagnosis socket must first be removed. Ensuring that the adapter loom switch is in the off position, the 5-pin plug is then joined to the socket, and the ignition switched on. The 1552's lead has 3 plugs. The black plug provides the power supply to the tester, and the white plug transmits the self-diagnosis data. The blue plug is not normally required. The black plug should be joined to the adapter cable first. Make sure it's connected correctly. At this point, the 1552's startup screen should be displayed. If it isn't, then do not connect the white plug. Recheck that the black plug is connected correctly, and then consult the workshop manual for further details. This point is most important because if the diagnosis sockets have, by accident, been wired incorrectly, it's possible that the positive supply cable may come into contact with the 1552's white plug. This could seriously damage the 1552, resulting in an expensive repair. If the startup screen is displayed, as it is here, connect the white plug to the remaining socket. Start the engine and leave it idling. If it won't start, crank the starter for at least 5 seconds and leave the ignition switched on. This enables any defective signals to be detected by the self-diagnosis system and be stored in the memory. The startup screen asks for an address word to be entered. Word is an unfortunate translation. It really means code. The address word or code for the engine management ECU is 01. The code is obtainable from either the workshop manual or by pressing the Help key. Help displays all the currently available address words in sequence. For Skoda vehicles, at the moment, Only 01 for the engine management system is applicable, but in the future, as more systems are introduced, some of the other address codes will become relevant. Having entered the address code, the 1552 screen confirms the system to which the code is applicable. Notice that there is a letter Q in the top corner of the display. This is a reminder to press the Q button if you wish to confirm the command. If the incorrect code has been keyed in accidentally, then pressing the C key will cancel the command and thus enable you to enter another. However, as we do wish to call up the engine ECU, we press Q. The 1552 now transmits the address code signal to wake up the ECU. There's a slight pause while this takes place. If the Mono-Motronic ECU answers, then a display similar to this will appear. If, on the other hand, the control unit does not answer, then simply press the Help key. The 1552 automatically displays a list of the most likely causes. The most common of these, by the way, is forgetting to turn on the ignition at the beginning of the sequence. Alternatively, you can of course refer to the workshop manual where you will find printed information. Having rectified the problem, whatever it may be, you can re-enter the 01 address code and try again. As seen just a few minutes ago, a display similar to this will appear when the control unit answers successfully. This series of digits represents the control unit's identification number, and this group corresponds to the engine's output in kilowatts. The following digits and letters signify engine capacity, Mono-Motronic version, the ECU's software version, and the control unit's coding. They should all be noted down. This data should always be compared with the workshop literature to verify that the correct control unit for the vehicle is installed. Having confirmed that the ECU is correct, you can proceed further. The symbol in the corner of the display means press the arrow key to move on. This calls up the next screen, which is the function menu. Having made contact with the control unit via the address code, the function menu allows you to select a number of self-diagnosis functions. A list of them can be obtained by pressing the Help key. Not all are applicable to the Mono-Motronic system, so we'll explain which ones are in the course of this video. You'll also find detailed operating instructions, including the applicable codes, in the workshop manual. To interrogate the fault memory, the code 02 is required. To confirm the instruction, we press the Q button. The next screen displays the total number of faults stored in the memory. If there aren't any faults recorded, the statement "No faults recognized" will appear. Pressing the arrow key once calls up data about the first fault. This is in the form of a 5-digit fault source code, which must be noted down for future reference. Pressing the arrow key again calls up more information about the fault. The component's name, current flow diagram symbol, and likely fault are all displayed and should be noted down. Incidentally, due to the way the self-diagnosis system works, it cannot differentiate between an open circuit fault and a short circuit to positive. For this reason, both fault possibilities are included in the display. On occasions, you may find 2 letters accompanying the fault description. SP means sporadic fault, indicating that the fault is of an intermittent type. Subsequent presses of the arrow key call up similar information about the remaining recorded faults. Don't forget to note all these details down. After calling up the last fault, Pressing the arrow key again returns you to the function menu and the test is complete. To close the communication with the ECU, enter the function code 06 and confirm with the Q button. This ends the output from this control unit and returns the 1552 to the startup screen. At this point, if you wish, you can disconnect the 1552 from the vehicle. For safety reasons, always ensure that the ignition is switched off before removing the plugs. The complete fault information, including the codes, must then be compared with the fault table in the workshop manual. It lists the fault codes, possible causes, likely symptoms, and the procedures required to help further identify the problem area. And remember, don't start any further fault finding or repairs until you have referred to the relevant workshop literature. At this point, it's worth reminding ourselves of how the self-diagnosis system recognizes faults. We explained earlier that it can only ascertain that the complete circuit is at fault. Therefore, to identify whether the defect lies within the component or the wiring, further testing will be required. A visual inspection for loose or corroded connections should always be made first. And an ohmmeter will be required to test the circuit for continuity and short circuit. The VAG1552-18 test box, which connects to the ECU's harness and can therefore be used to test each circuit in turn, will prove invaluable when carrying out this type of work. Furthermore, a detailed check of any suspect component should always be made before it's condemned. Component testing procedures and specifications are all detailed in the workshop manual. And please remember to check the simple items such as fuses, the security of engine earth straps and battery cables, etc. Unusual symptoms are often traced to surprisingly simple causes. Now, let's briefly summarize how to interrogate the Mono-Motronic's fault memory. Start the engine and allow it to idle. If it won't start, crank it for at least 5 seconds and leave the ignition switched on. Enter the engine electronics address word 01 and confirm it with the Q button. When the control unit has answered, by displaying its identification number, press the arrow key to call up the next menu. Key in the function code 02 for interrogate fault memory and press Q to confirm. The 1552 then displays the total number of faults. Pressing the arrow key repeatedly calls up a fault code and a description of each fault. If it's accompanied by the letters SP, you'll know it's an intermittent fault. Having returned to the function menu, enter the end output code 06 to close the communication with the ECU. Finally, with the ignition switched off, the 1552 can be disconnected. Having identified and repaired any faults, the next operation is to erase the fault memory. Please remember, the fault memory cannot be erased until any open or short-circuit faults have been repaired. To avoid the risk of an operator erasing the fault memory before it has been interrogated, the Mono-Motronic's fault memory can be erased only after it has been interrogated. So, to begin with, interrogate the memory, as described previously, until the screen returns to the function menu. The function code for erasing the memory can once again be determined from the help screen. the code is 05. Having entered the code and pressed the Q button, a signal is sent to erase the ECU's memory. If it's successful, it's confirmed by this display. Pressing the arrow key returns you to the function menu. The procedure is completed by entering the end output code 06 and pressing the Q button. To verify that all the faults have been repaired, thoroughly road test the vehicle and interrogate the fault memory again. This is the only way of ensuring that the car is returned to the customer fault-free. Finally, in this section, it's worth remembering, just in case you have any problems at any time, that the 1552 has its own self-test facility. This runs a test sequence on the internal electronics and its display. However, we'll look at this in more detail and explain how to exchange the program card in section 4 of this tape. Over and above interrogating and cancelling the fault memory, the Mono-Motronic self-diagnosis system enables the function of two of its actuators to be tested in what is known as the final control diagnosis mode. An additional function, the measuring value block, enables values from the various sensors and monitoring circuits to be called up for evaluation. But we'll begin this section by looking at the final control diagnosis mode. The check energizes the throttle positioner and the activated charcoal filter valve. Final control diagnosis can only be activated with the ignition switched on and the engine stationary. Final control diagnosis is initiated from the function menu. So proceed to the function menu as explained in section 1 for interrogating the fault memory. The function code for final control diagnosis is 03. Once again, the code can be determined from either the workshop manual or by pressing the help key. After keying in 03, press the Q button to confirm the code. The 1552's screen displays the name of the first component to be tested and its current flow diagram designation. At the same time, the positioner should fully retract into its basic position. The arrow symbol in the corner of the screen is there once again to remind you as to which key must be used to move the test sequence on. Pressing it starts the second part of the throttle positioner's test, a functional check. If it's working correctly, it should move fully backwards and forwards repeatedly. A further press of the arrow key calls up the next component, the manifold preheating relay. However, as this item is not currently fitted to Skoda models, the test can be bypassed and moved on to the next component by pressing the same key again. It's the activated charcoal filter valve solenoid, or ACF solenoid as it's known for short, which is energized in this test. The valve, which regulates the fuel vapors stored in the charcoal filter entering the engine, should be heard to click rhythmically. You'll need to listen very carefully, as it's fairly quiet in operation. In fact, the ACF valve is the only other component in the test sequence. Pressing the arrow key again calls up a check which isn't applicable for Skoda vehicles at the moment. A further press of the key and the display returns to the function menu. From here, you close the communication with the ECU by entering the end output code, which then, as usual, returns you to the startup screen. If during the final control diagnosis check either component fails to work, then further testing will be needed. As mentioned earlier, you may have to check the connections, wiring, and the component itself before an accurate diagnosis can be made. So here once again is a summary of how to complete a final control diagnosis check. Switch on the ignition, but don't start the engine. Proceed to the function menu as per interrogating the fault memory. Enter the function code 03 and press Q to confirm. Use the arrow key to call up each component in turn. Visually check the operation of the throttle positioner and check the ACF solenoid valves functioning by listening carefully. Return to the function menu by pressing the arrow key and then enter the end output code 06 to close the communication. To help isolate the fault area, follow the component testing instructions in the workshop manual. You will find the VAG1552 most helpful for this type of testing. The measuring value block is useful in checking the overall function of the Mono-Motronic system and the testing of a number of sensors. To fully appreciate the relevance and interaction of the various values, you will, however, require a basic understanding of the Mono-Motronic system. This will be covered in detail when you attend the relevant Skoda technical training course. You should also find the self-education book, which is available now in your dealership, most helpful in getting to know the Mono-Motronic system. Now, let's explain how to enter the measuring block mode. Start the engine and proceed to the function menu. Enter the function code 08 and press Q. Once again, this code is available from the help screen. As you can see, a 2-digit display group number is next required. A range of display group numbers from 00 to 05 can be utilized. Each display group calls up sets of different data from the Mono-Motronic's dynamic memory. Let's see how. Entering the display group number 00, followed by the Q button, displays 10 groups or fields of digital values ranging from 0 to 255. To determine their function and to decode them, you'll need to refer to the table in the workshop manual. Field 1, for instance, represents the coolant temperature, while Field 2 corresponds to engine RPM. A comparison table in the workshop manual gives physical cross-reference values for some of the fields. For instance, a value of 29 in Field 1 would correspond to a coolant temperature of 75 degrees C. Some fields relate to two different areas depending upon whether the engine is running or just the ignition is switched on, but this can be determined from the table. As the 10 digital values represent separate areas of the Mono-Motronic system, they can be used, together with the workshop manual, to build up a picture as to the overall functioning of the system. Some values are used by the factory during production and require extensive theoretical knowledge and practical experience for their correct evaluation. Thus, fields 6 to 10 are not significant for normal maintenance work. The measuring block mode can also be used to check the operation of the idle switch, throttle potentiometer, coolant temperature sensor, and the intake air temperature sensor. Full details are given in the manual, but as an example, here's how the throttle potentiometer is checked. Display fields 2 and 3 are applicable to the test. With the ignition on, the throttle is slowly fully opened. Simultaneously, the value in Field 2 should increase evenly up to 1/4 throttle opening, and from there on remain constant. In field 3, the figure should remain constant up to quarter throttle and then increase uniformly to full throttle. An intermittent reading would suggest a defective track within the potentiometer. Details of all the test procedures can be found in the workshop literature. To return the screen from the 10 digital values to the display group menu, press the C key. Pressing the arrow key would return you to the function menu. On Skoda vehicles which are fitted with the shorter ECU, and that's the majority of cars, it's possible by entering alternative display group numbers to call up sets of physical values. For instance, display group 01 calls up 4 values. They are engine RPM, coolant temperature, lambda value, and system status. In this instance, the second digit of the system status field records the position of the idling switch. 1 indicates that the switch's contacts are closed, and a 0 signifies that the contacts are open. By the way, this figure in the top of the screen corresponds to the second digit of the currently selected display group. For example, 1 indicates that the display group 01 is selected. To enter an alternative display group, you can either press the C key, which returns you to the display group menu, or, much easier, press the up arrow key to move up to the next display group. Pressing the down arrow key, on the other hand, moves down one display group. Pressing the arrow key would return you to the function menu. Display group 02 calls up RPM, injector opening time, displayed in milliseconds, battery voltage, and intake air temperature. Group 03 displays RPM, engine load, throttle angle, and ignition timing. The letter V alongside the timing figure indicates before TDC, and an N signifies after TDC. Don't forget, though, as the ignition timing is automatically regulated by the Mono-Motronic ECU to maintain a smooth idle speed, this figure will vary continually. Display group 04 calls up just 3 values: RPM, engine load, and system status. The final group, 05, indicates RPM, the ACF valve's duty cycle percentage, lambda control value, and the adaptive mixture correction figure. Unfortunately, we have insufficient time within this video to explain the exact meaning and use of all the physical values. However, with experience, you'll find using the measuring block mode, in conjunction with the workshop literature, most helpful in diagnosing problems and assessing the overall operation of the Mono-Motronic system. To exit the measuring block mode and return to the function menu, use the arrow key. Complete the sequence as usual by entering the end output code. And remember, switch off the ignition before disconnecting the tester from the vehicle. Once again, to recap this section, here's a summary of how to call up the measuring block values. For most testing, start the engine and allow it to idle. Proceed to the function menu as described in the previous sections. Enter the function code 08 and press Q to confirm. Enter the required display group numbers and press Q to confirm. To move up to the next display group, press the up arrow key. To select a lower display group, use the down arrow key. As a reminder, the second digit of the selected display group is displayed in the screen. Pressing the arrow key will exit the measuring block mode and return the display to the function menu. Enter 06 to end the output and return to the startup screen. The 1552 can then be removed from the vehicle. So, now we know how to use the 1552, let's briefly remind ourselves of the best way to approach fault finding. 1. Listen to the customer's complaint carefully and obtain as much information as possible. Don't jump to conclusions and check the simple things first. Even sophisticated management systems can't overcome problems such as a defective spark plug, a loose connection, or an incorrectly adjusted throttle cable. 2. Use the 1552 to interrogate the fault memory. Carry out a final control diagnosis check and call up the measuring block mode. Note down the details of all reported faults. Erase the ECU's memory. 3. Refer to the Technical Service Handbook. The book lists the most frequently reported problems and their likely causes. A few minutes spent looking through this could save you hours of wasted effort. 4. Refer to the workshop manual and compare any reported faults with the test chart. 5. Carry out the checks and tests listed in the manual relevant to the reported fault to progressively locate the problem. 6. Finally, if at this point no faults have been detected, then you will need to carry out a complete electrical check of the system in conjunction with the VAG1552 and the test table in the workshop manual. Oh, and do remember that the self-diagnosis system cannot check items such as the fuel system, pressures, etc. Those have to be checked in the normal way. Remembering these 6 basic steps should help you to approach fault finding in a logical and systematic way. Periodically, the 1552 should be tested to confirm that it's operating correctly by performing a self-test. Firstly, connect only the black plug to the vehicle. At the Startup menu, press the C key. This brings up a menu with 3 options. Key 1 returns you to the Startup screen, and 4 allows you to program in your dealership's number. This should be input when you first start using the 1552, as some functions can only be carried out after the number has been installed. However, you'll find full details of how to do this in the instruction manual. Key 3 initiates the self-test. The self-test firstly displays the installed program card's version number and the country to which it is applicable. Subsequent displays indicate one by one the circuits which are being tested. The self-test takes only a few minutes to complete. Full details about the self-test can be found on page 29 of the 1552's instruction manual. On completion of the test, pressing the arrow key returns the display to the previous menu. We mentioned earlier that the program card, which incorporates an electronic chip, can be exchanged for new versions as and when they become available. Exchanging it is straightforward. Make sure that the tester is disconnected and remove the end cover. Carefully withdraw the card, taking care not to touch the electrical contacts with your fingers, as static electricity from your body could easily destroy the chip. Replacing the card is simply a reversal of removing it, but make sure it's inserted the correct way up. Although within this video we've spent some time in explaining the various functions of the 1552, in reality, when working on the vehicle, it takes just a few minutes to enter and call up the self-diagnosis data. It's important for you to become confident with the tester's functions, as you'll almost certainly need to use it more frequently in the future. We hope, therefore, that you'll now take the opportunity to improve your knowledge and skills by using the VAG 1552 as often as possible.